Also wanted to ask you, when we look at the map-tested toilets, American Standard has several models that flush 1,000 grams. Can you share anything with us about your product development process that's led to this achievement?
Only to say that we work pretty hard at it. I'm trying not to have this be a sales pitch, but we have a lot of good people that know their jobs, and they know their jobs very well, to try and deliver a toilet to the market. And we try as best we can to understand the customer. That being what the customer wants, and we translate those wants into how we internally test our toilets.
Very good. And getting back to the map test, do you credit the map test with creating the impetus to improve performance of low consumption toilets?
Do I?
Yeah. Or were there other drivers?
Well, I credit the map test for making 1.6 gallon toilets flush better. I think what we learned from making 1.6 gallon toilets better, we easily translated, and that's not me, it's my other friends in manufacturing, translated that into 128 toilets, the ATT toilets. Okay. But roundabout answer, Bob, yes.
Okay, very good. Rob Zimmerman from Kohler Company. Kohler Company is a 2-time WaterSense Manufacturer Partner of the Year. Rob mentioned, be careful what you say, Rob, because you're on tape here, but at the 2008 Emerging Technology Symposium, you said that a good test for toilet needs to be multifaceted and take into account all customer expectations. How do you envision communicating results from a multifaceted test to consumers in a manner that's easy for them to understand?
Well, that's really the question here, I think, is that are we being well served by how the MAP scores are being communicated to consumers? I do think that the first thing you have to do is get into the consumer's shoes, so to speak, thinking about what they're experiencing as they're walking into a big box retailer to purchase a toilet, or researching online. As fascinating as this subject is for all of us, most people don't have a clue as to toilet testing, or nor do they want to know about it, except to talk about it at parties, and I get that all the time, so that's kind of interesting. But what we've seen there is that whatever consumers are looking for in aisle, it's got to be very simple, and it's got to be very intuitive, and it's got to align with the things that matter to them in terms of what are they looking for with a toilet. There's the obvious physical things that they can see, but really when it comes down to is that there's a lot of factors of performance in a toilet, and that's one of the things I talked about in that talk in August of 2008. But they really come down to 2 big buckets, and one of them would be their expectation of how the product is going to flush, how it's going to perform while it's flushing. And then the second bucket is what is it going to look like when it's done flushing. And so the big bucket about flushing performance will be everything from the MAP, the bulk waste removal score, could be light waste removal, splashing, how loud it flushes, the noise volume, but the single most important thing is that it doesn't plug. So you can take all of those and wrap them into some sort of flushing performance metric. That would be good. And then the other side of that is, what does the bowl look like afterwards? How clean is it? Is there marking on it? How long does it take to refill? Those kind of things. So if we can get to a simple, maybe a 2-factor metric, and again, I'd like to see it. I'm concerned always about the numbers, and would like to see it as a good, better, best. I know, I'm sure everyone knows that Consumer Reports rates products of all different kinds with a kind of a modified good, better, best method in multiple factors. And I think that ultimately, if we're looking at what do consumers want, they want something simple that really speaks to them about what they're expecting from their products and their toilets.
Well, I think those are great points, Rob. In fact, I was going to ask about that later if we didn't address that. And I think you're right. Bowl evacuation is important, but also the the clean appearance, after the flushing is over. Same question that I asked CJ about the MAP test, specifically, any changes that you would make in it to improve it?
I think the test protocol itself is pretty robust. I mean, we at Koeller use it as a QC test in our factories, and it's the challenge, of course, I think CJ brought this up, is that if you can make it a little bit more statistically valid, that would help. Of course, every extra sample you have to test adds cost to it, and I'm sure other manufacturers too have complained about the cost of the testing. So there's a trade-off there, I think. Again, I think it's not so much the test protocol itself as how it's being used in the marketplace, and again, it's what consumers are wanting, and I think a lot of that's being driven by the big box retailers wanting a way to differentiate products in aisle for consumers and drive, provide more information to consumers. But the test itself, I think, is fine.
Just so you know, John and Bill will get a chance to respond to any suggestions later on during the panel discussion. So we're just kind of gathering some opinions and insights here. John Watson with Sloan Valve. Sloan is certainly a brand that's closely associated with commercial bathrooms. When considering toilet testing methods, what difference would you recommend for toilets intended for commercial application, John?
Well, that's a pretty good question, and I would say that somebody at a joint meeting of CSA, ASME, our working group, once said that you don't defecate differently in public than you do in your own restroom. And while that's absolutely true, I think there are other factors that one needs to consider as they think about sort of commercial toilet testing. First off, relative to the current test, two comments I have. One, I believe that the 500 grams as we have it, or 1,000 grams that you hear a lot about today, I think some sort of a reasonable, sort of more practical cap would be important for a couple of reasons. One, I think we need to understand that we may be misleading the public a little bit in terms of, okay, so you get 1,000 grams into the pipe, what are you going to do with 1,000 grams in that pipe? I mean, there are other factors associated with it, and if that's an unreasonable number, I think we should be, should be careful about that. The second thing is that when you get into a commercial environment, you're going to have other additives that are going into the toilet with it. So as you look at the volume of stuff that you're putting in, we see things in a commercial environment, and quite frankly, some of them are pretty sickening. But
come on, John, give us an example.
You get underwear in airports. People have an accident on the plane. They're not going to leave it on the plane. They're going to take it with them. They're going to try to flush it down a toilet in an airport restroom. Certainly, drug users will throw paraphernalia down in an effort to try to get rid of it before they get on a plane. And there's really a wide range of things that you can find in there. And people will do things, we talked a little bit about behavior, but people will actually do things in a public restroom that they won't do in their own home. I'm not sure why that is, but they do. And so, in my view, I think it needs to be a little bit more robust and be able to handle the things that the general public will throw at it.
Okay. A related question then, in your opinion, John, what type of information would specifiers like to see regarding toilet performance for toilets in commercial applications?
Well, I think certainly the MAP test as a basis with some reasonable number is a very good start, and the work that's already been done, make no mistake, has been helpful to all the manufacturers to advance the science. So I think that's a great basis to start with. But as Rob mentioned, there are other aspects relative to toilet testing that we need to all be concerned about, and we should be looking at those like rim wash. Again, in a public arena, the worst thing that you can have in terms of a failure is a plugged up toilet or a toilet that hasn't evacuated. I mean, that creates a lot of problems, in particular in a lot of areas, but things like restaurants. I mean, that's a public health issue that can essentially close a restroom down and ultimately close the restaurant down if that's not clean. So, I mean, there are a lot of issues we need to be concerned about. Rob kind of put them into 3 buckets, and I respect that. I would add a third bucket. The third bucket I would add is, how do we get it from point A to point B after it evacuates from the bowl? So if we can cover those 3, I think we'd be in very good shape.
Okay, thanks, Jen.